hmm I don't think also we should like in dealing with emotion, like I think a lot of times men deal with it in the extreme. Like when I'm saying being vulnerable or being emotional, I don't mean where you're blubbering. Oh, I'm so, like I'm not talking like that. I wouldn't even want to see a woman acting like that. I think it is important to learn how to control your emotions depending on what it is. When you are in a situation where, like, your parent dies, like I've seen situations like that, and there are some men who would be like, I didn't even cry at my parents' funeral. Now I don't know if that is the way they're dealing with their emotion, but like that would be a situation where I would expect to see you cry and be upset. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to be hard. And I want my son to also be able to express his emotion. It was this oh my god, it was this I think it was on like YouTube or one, and this little boy, he was crying. His dad, sorry, okay, his dad was showing him, basically was telling him, it's okay for you to cry, son, it's okay. But then he followed up with, when you get upset, this is how you're supposed to handle situations. And I think that's an appropriate way to teach men how to deal with emotion.
Anybody else wanted to add to that emotion vulnerability?
I mean, I think emotions are good. I think what's most important is more so emotional intelligence, like having
Mhm.
a language around how it is that you're feeling. And so I was watching this documentary. The average individual can identify 5 feelings, and they're typically angry, happy, sad, frustrated, and excited. Those are around the five, words that people can identify for emotion. And there are so many feelings, there are so many emotions on the spectrum of being human, that 5 words aren't enough. And
Mhm.
so, when you talk about someone being emotionally available, being vulnerable, when I think of vulnerable, I think of someone that has the capacity and the willingness to express that language, of what it is that they're feeling. And when they're emotional, they're in a state of being where they're allowing themselves to feel what it is or experience whatever it is that they're experiencing. And so, building a language around that bridges the gap between the two, to where, we can connect now, because you can tell me what your needs are. You can express to me how it is that you're feeling. And so, I think one of the reasons why we see, men or black men, struggling with emotional intelligence, is because we weren't really, even women, like we weren't raised with the language, to build a language around how we feel. And so rather than you articulating what it is that you're experiencing, now you're acting out, because you don't know how else to release that energy, how else to move through that experience.
I
So
think somebody made a good point. And this is not just the vulnerable, women being vulnerable. I think that, men being vulnerable, but I think it's also important when you talk about emotional, having control over your emotions. I think that a lot of times when we talk about women who are angry, the angry black woman, or the woman who's aggressive, or all those things, it's because she doesn't know how to handle her emotions. She doesn't know how to, you know, articulate what it is that she's trying to say in a a good way. And so she lashes out, or she does something, overly too emotional, so to speak.
I like the saying where it's like, level up your argument, not your tone, where it's like, build up the language around what it is that you're trying to say, so that you can articulate it and express it, rather than raising your voice and now insulting people or gaslighting people, because you just don't even know what else to say.
I think also what's important though is that it's a safe environment to express those emotions too, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of people don't like to be vulnerable or don't like to express themselves because they don't feel like it's a safe place to do so. So I think when it comes to a man, they also have to feel that same amount of safety as a woman feels with them in order to open up and be vulnerable and more emotional with their partner.
Right.
Yeah, I know even in kindergarten, like I used to teach kindergarten, they used to have like this big chart. And on that chart, it had the different, like emoji faces or whatever on it that had the words under the emotion. So kids will learn how to articulate what they're feeling. And I think that's very helpful. I think as adults, we can kind of use that to kind of
It's
speak to
taken.
what,
I
yeah.
literally use a feeling chart. Like I literally have it like saved on my phone. I think it's so important to be
Mhm.
able to accurately identify what it is that you're
Yeah.
experiencing because you claim that energy, you claim that experience over you once you say it. So like, being stressed and overwhelmed, they're two completely different feelings. And a lot of the times people will be like, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed." When really you're not overwhelmed. You just have a lot going on, and having a lot going on is the normal day to day. And you just need to learn how to manage it better. And so, to your point, I absolutely love those charts. And me at 29 years old, I happily use it.
Yeah. I know, like even anger, like little kids, they don't know the difference between like kind of anger and disappointment.
Yes.
And so those were things that are you really angry or are you disappointed? And then, you kind of walk them through that. And I think that part is very important, is having the emotional, like you said, the emotional language. Yeah, because when they don't have it, they fight.
Yeah, because
I
it,
just
it
want
can
to
feel like it's the same emotion, but
Mhm.
the language will be able to guide you to the fact that it's not.
Right.
And just to piggyback off what Christina said, is creating those safe space for men to be able to come to you about certain things, and to also not feel like that at a later date you're going to throw those things back up in his face when we don't know the level of vulnerability that a man has to come to even want to express those things to a woman. So don't make him regret that by later on when you get mad, you get into an argument and you throwing that
Right.
back up in that man's face. That man is never going to ever be able to be vulnerable with you ever again. He's never going to be able to trust you with his feelings and his emotions.
Nobody, not just you. He ain't gonna trust nobody with.
And a lot of times, some women, you may damage a man behind that to where he will never be vulnerable with another woman ever again. So I think we have to be mindful of, when someone is coming to us and being open and honest with us and being in those moments, in those emotions, to really just listen, to understand what they're going through, and to not make them feel guilty about it later.